All right, good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are so excited to be here with Nicola Griffith in conversation with Edward Austin Hall for a celebration of Menewood, a novel. It is the much anticipated sequel to Hild, which is one of Charis's all-time favorites. And of course, Nicola is one of Charis's all-time favorite writers in general, with a deep and beautiful back catalog of books that we still celebrate and sell. Nicola was last here with us to celebrate Spear, and that event is in our YouTube library. So go back and check it out if you have not seen that. I'll introduce Ed. Edward Austin Hall co-edited Mothership, Tales from Afrofuturism and Beyond, which was acknowledged in a front-page NPR story headlined, "Sci-Fi has changed a lot in the past decade. These 7 reads will show you how." His novel, Dread Isle, was published in 2020 and is also featured in Charis's YouTube channel, so check that out. His novelette, Green Tree... I can never pronounce this word, Ed. Treacheries? Am I saying
Green Treacheries.
Treacheries, I don't know why. Appears in the 2022 anthology Terminus 2. Currently, he is editing some transcribed and fiery civil rights-related sermons by the Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian that are in search of a publisher. So that's really exciting. Welcome, Ed. We're always glad to be here with you. And Nicola Griffith is a dual UK-US citizen living in Seattle. She is the author of award-winning novels, including Hild and Ammonite, and her shorter work has appeared in Nature, New Scientist, The New York Times, etc. She is the founder and co-host of #Criplet. She holds a PhD from Anglia Ruskin University and enjoys a ferocious bout of wheelchair boxing. She is married to novelist and screenwriter Kelly Erskridge. So thank you both so much for being with us. And we want to encourage folks to ask questions at any time. You can put them in the chat or in the Q&A box on the far right of your screen. But we also just want you to hang out and have fun and hear this beautiful conversation. It's always exciting to me when we get to come back to characters who we love and see what's going on in the world. So I look forward to getting to explore with both of you. So thanks for coming back to Charis.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's good to be back. Nicola, it's always a pleasure to see you. And no offense, but it was even better to see Hild again. And several reviews of Menewood, the new book, the new Hild book, including the recent one from the New York Times, discuss the novel's immersive qualities, which I can attest to myself. Did you pursue that quality in writing the book? And if so, how'd you do it?
Wow. Well, okay. First of all, yes. Second, it's what I always do. It's what my writing does. And third, I actually wrote my PhD thesis on this. So I will try boil it down to some manageable amount as to how I did it. But yeah, no, the immersive quality is something I love about books. My favorite books are the books where I just fall in and I fall into the character and I'm in that character's world, walking through it, smelling what she smells, hearing what he hears, touching what they touch. And eventually, in my favorite books, I absorb the lessons of those characters. I have their experiences. I become them for a while. And so that is what I try to do for my readers. It's what I love, and so I can only hope that other people love the kind of books I love. And so that's what I want to write. I want to give them the ride of their life. I want to take them to places they've never been. I want them to feel all the things, that the highs, the lows, joy, grief, rage, fear, but also those lovely quiet moments, those moments of friendship, or two tired people having done a good job just sitting and sharing a drink, or Just simple comforts.
This book covers a very different span of time than Hild does. So could you talk about why that's the case and maybe talk about where the characters are?
Sure. Well, in
Maybe.
Hild, in the first book, in Hild, we begin with her being 3, and then she goes through till she's about 18. And the point of that book is to introduce the world and to introduce Hild and to watch Hild come into a sense of herself. And in that book, Hild is very much living on the edge. She's on a knife edge all the time because she is the king's seer. I mean, she's not actually a seer. She's just has this powerful imagination and a very, very acute sense of observation. She's really good observer of human nature and the wider nature. And she uses those observations to appear to be able to prophesy. But really, she's just putting 2 and 2 together and going, aha, I've seen those birds before. They come when it's about to be really cold. So, hey, everybody, it's about to be really cold. Simple things like that. But because the point of being a seer is to be infallible, you have to be right every single time. You cannot afford to be wrong. So she lives in this constant pressure cooker of stress. And the joy at the end of the first book is she finds a way to escape, to get out from under that constant pressure. She gets to be herself. She's no longer the seer. She's no longer the godmouth. She gets to go be Hild, Lady of Elmet, over there, away from the king and all the horror and fear. And then in the second, and that covers about 14 years of her life. So my original plan when I set out to write Menewood is, because I thought I'm going to write a trilogy. It's the first year is going to be Hild till she's about 18. The second book is going to be Hild until she's about 33. And the third book is going to be from 33 to 66. When, spoiler, she dies. But I started to write Menewood, and I began that just like 4 months after the end of Hild. I started to write that, and I got 100,000 words in, and I'd only covered a year. I thought, I cannot write a 1.5 million word book. So I had to really rethink. And in this book, Hild is really becoming herself. She is not learning how to be a person as a child does as they become an adult. Now she's learning to be in her adult self. She's learning to take her own power. Before she spoke on behalf of the king, she was the king's fist, or she was the king's godmouth. Now she is Lady of Elmet, and after several things happen in Menewood, there is no longer a king for her to obey. And so she functionally kind of becomes a king. She is absolutely top dog of her arena, and she has to learn. She has to learn how to manage that power, how to be powerful without becoming evil. And the book covers 4 years, and they are 4 of the most tumultuous years in northern British history. I mean, talk about regime change. We go through kings, they fall like 9 pins. And she's in the thick of every single bit of that. Have I answered your question?
That answers my question beautifully. And I think since you've already foreshadowed that something happens to the king, might this be a good time for a reading? I think
Sure. I'm gonna read something that I've never read before because, it's good to do something new. So bear with me while I sort of try to figure out the context you need. Okay, so I've already said that Hild is Lady of Elmet and she's managed to get out from underneath Edwin's sway, because now the godmouths for Edwin are the priests, the archbishop, the overbishop, Paulinus, and all his under priests. It's their problem now, not hers. So she's very happy. And she is also pregnant. And at this point, the reading I'm going to do, it starts in autumn of the year 632. And Hild is very pregnant, and she's like literally days away from giving birth. War is coming. The king is gathering his banners and his men and has made the first step of his march. And Hild's like, woohoo, yep, I'm not involved. That's great. And then the king sends two of his warrior Yesiths, Dudda and Wolf, to bring Hild to him. And she thinks, well, okay, he just needs some sort of yay, good luck, and then she can get back to her home and give birth and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so Hild, mounted on her mare, Signet, and Cian are escorted to a place called Aberford, where the king and the army are preparing to march for war. In the bright sun, Aberford smelt like a cauterizing iron, the air sudden and dangerous. They walked their horses past groups of men and lines of picketed mounts towards Edwin's banner of the Ifing boar. Opposite the banner stood the standard, its glass ball glinting blue, with the king's chair beneath it. Edwin sat, with Stephanus the priest standing at his left shoulder and his son Osfrith at his right. But where was Paulinus? Where was the king's overbishop and godmouth? Stephanus bent to murmur something in Edwin's ear as the king watched her and Cian approach. Hild couldn't tell if Edwin was listening to his priest or not. He moved from side to side as restless as that awful Easter day after Eomer had tried to kill him. When he snapped his fingers at one of the housemen, everyone flinched. Dudda took Signet's reins and Wolf turned his mount to block Cian. The two men locked eyes. Without expression, Cian rested his sword hand on his thigh, ready to move. He looked at Hild. She shook her head. His sword hand remained on his thigh. She slid down from Signet with care. Edwin said loudly, I see you have your dog as well trained as I have you. Now, come to heel. She kept her face smooth and her hand away from her sacks. She could kill him. None could stop her from so close, but she wouldn't survive it. And Penda would do it for her anyway, sooner or later. Oh, you don't like that, do you? Edwin said. Hild recognized the tone, goading, wanting to provoke something he could control. Stephanus smiled slightly, but Osfrith too knew his father. An uncertain king was a dangerous king, dangerous for everyone. She bent her head. My king. The houseman handed Edwin a horn travelling cup. Without taking his gaze from Hild, he lifted the cup to his lips and appeared to sip, but Hild could tell by the strained swallow that he had taken nothing. Still loudly, he said, I am Edwin Ifing, Overking of the Isle. The part of the king is to win, and I always win. And the part of the king is to satisfy the gods on behalf of his people. But I'm tired of these skirted Christ priests of a skirted God who bleat from hiding about meekness and turning the other cheek and rewards in heaven. Men want to hear they will get their reward right here on Middle-earth. Stephanus leaned forward. Lord King, we are not hiding. While the Overbishop selflessly watches over the Queen's safety, I myself... Oh, shut up. Edwin did not lift his gaze from Hild. The crow hides with the Queen in Sancton, probably with all the church treasure, my treasure, but we don't need him. Just as we don't need the men of Craven and their banners, do we? He looked at Osfrith. No, Osfrith said, steadily enough, but the sip he took from his own cup was more like a gulp. Cadwallon alone rides with 80 men, Hild said. Yes, and I have 4 times that many. Osfrith looked into his cup. Edwin was overstating his numbers. Christ is on our side, Stephanus said. 1 more word, said Edwin. To Hild, Honeytongue sends to say only 400 march under Pender's banner. And to the Christ numbers are as chaff in the wind, said Stephanus. Our cause is He stared down at the bubbling slash in his belly. Edwin wiped his sacks on Stephanus's sleeve and sat back down. He tilted the blade in the sun, beckoned one of the housemen close, used his tunic to polish away a smear near the hilt, and sheathed it. Behind him, Stephanus, cradling his coiled guts in his hand, folded onto the turf. Every rustle of cloth, every crunch of hoof on stone was distinct. A gust of wind lifted the Ifing banner. It snapped once, twice, then was still. 2 housemen dragged Stephanus away. A loop of intestines, like a bloody blue sausage, trailed behind him, leaving a smear so bright it seemed to glow. So, now we need a new godmouth. That's you, niece. You're coming with us. The world slowed. My time is almost upon me. If you have to squeeze out your wound turd by the side of the road, kick dirt over it and be tied back on your horse, you will come. You are my godmouth. I've never spoken for any god. Weird then, even gods bow before weird. Foresee our victory. Proclaim that winning is our weird. Your Hild, Butcherbird and Light of the World, make them believe. Make me believe, because he didn't believe. He was going down in red ruin, and he knew it. But he must march. A king must lead his army when another king threatened his rule. To do otherwise meant being forsworn, branded craven and neathing, a man with no name. Edward Ifing would march his Yesiths and Thanes, his spearmen and beardless striplings to war, because he would not kneel to greater numbers, would not bow his head and call another man lord. He would lead them all to slaughter, so that his good name would live on. But for his name to live, the fight must be worthy of song. And to make such a fight, his men had to believe they could win. For weird was as it would be. Nothing was certain until the last throw. He was Edwin Overking, and she was his cup and knucklebones.
That was lovely, Nicola. I love that scene. I know you remember the actor, Al Swearingen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's how I always pictured Edwin. So, yeah, he's such a menacing figure in the books. So, yeah, we need a Hild mini-series or maxi-series, preferably.
Well, yeah. I mean, I agree. I think each of the novels so far could be 2 or 3 seasons each.
Yeah.
It needs to be a huge prestige, mega budget thing. I'm with you.
Yeah. In terms of what we have visually now, I should say that, and I know you were happy about this, the Balbuso twins created the cover for the new book, and they also painted the one for Hild. And I believe you campaigned for their return, yes?
Oh, absolutely. When the publisher, I don't know how many of you are writers listening, but if you're not, what happens when you're publishing a book? At some point, the publisher says, give us some ideas for the cover. And you give your ideas and they listen and then they completely ignore you. It's just how it works. I mean, with Hild, I said to my editor, I said, anything, Sean, it just must look lush. And the one thing I do not want is any representation of Hild on the cover. He said, oh, okay. And then what came back was this picture of Hild. But I couldn't be pissed off because it was such a gorgeous picture. I mean, despite all the anachronisms, I just loved it. It conveyed the character herself. So when it came time this time, in fact, even before it was time to say what I wanted, I wrote like a mini essay and I sent it to FSG and I said, okay, here's what I want. I want the Balbuso twins again because they did such a good job. I want them to age Hild a little. She needs to be standing somewhere high. Her hair needs to be moving. There has to be smoke. It's got to be war. And here are the colors. It needs to be autumnal and gold. And I said, and if it were up to me, Anna and Elena Balbuso would do every single Hild cover and they would just age her as Hild ages. And I expected to be completely ignored again, but then I got that cover and it's perfect. It's just, the only thing I would change is make her staff longer. It's too short because originally it was a sword and I'm like, no, she doesn't have a sword. So they changed it into a staff. But they couldn't make it long because then it would go right over her face.
Yeah, it'd be in front of her face, sure.
Yeah. But yeah.
I love both these covers. I love the color scheme. I love the great difference between the color schemes. And as you are now Dr. Nicola, not the pulp character, and you mentioned the anachronism present here. Tell me quickly, what is anachronistic in this image, please? I can guess, but
many things. The first thing is her male coat.
No, thought so.
Would not have had that.
Yeah.
Also, the cross is about, I would say, maybe a century or two too modern. His would have been much more the kind of thing you would expect to see in Francia. It would have been much more of an actual cross as opposed to the equal armed cross.
And when you say Francia, France?
Yeah. Basically, it's what was Gaul back then.
Right, Gaul, yeah.
And her sacks would have looked different, and it would have been hung from her belt sideways.
So parallel to the ground, sort of?
Parallel, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Just
how
so
long,
you pulled it
how
this
long
way.
was it? Don't you own a sax now?
I do. I have what's called a slaughter sax, which is from like the 9th or 10th century, and they're huge. They're like small swords.
Yeah.
They are really big. The kind of sax Hild would have been maybe like so, a foot long. I mean, the blade. I mean, it's a big blade.
Yeah.
Very frightening if you're faced with it. But a slaughter sax is more like, it really is a small sword.
it's occurring to me. I've been derelict. I do own the book Swords and Hilt Weapons. I should look and see if there's a sax depicted in there.
There are many kinds. That's the thing.
Thorough. Yeah.
So many kinds. It's like saying a gun, you know.
Sure. But
It
what it's
developed
not.
over hundreds of years.
Yes, what it is not. It's an XEAX. So yes, but neither a saxophone nor a seeks. Cool. Am I remembering correctly that you have kind of a long history with Whitby in your own life?
Yeah, I mean Whitby. I might be stretching this just a little, but you could say that Whitby is what made me a writer.
Do tell.
Yeah, I grew up in the north of England, in Yorkshire, in basically what then would have been Elmet, where Menewood is set. In fact, the neighbourhood I lived next to was called Menewood, which is why the book. Never mind, long story. But I grew up surrounded by history. I mean, 5,000 years of occupation, basically, of human occupation of the land. So there were ruins everywhere. If you're standing looking at the horizon and you're looking at a hill, that hill might not be a natural feature. It might actually be a barrow. So everything, just history and landscape, are so deeply entwined. And so I always thought about history and landscape together, but I never thought about really writing historical fiction until in my early 20s. I was living in a really miserable town called Hull on the east coast of England. And as I was having a bad time, and I decided to get away for the weekend and hiked up the coast to this place called Whitby, which I'd heard of, but I'd never actually visited, which is unusual because I'd visited all the other places of historical interest pretty much in Yorkshire. And I got to Whitby, and, you know, I knew about, I'd read Dracula, so I knew about the 99 Steps. I knew there was an abbey there. I'd read Possession, so I had some notion of the streets. But I did not expect that place. I climbed those steps, and when I stepped across the threshold of the abbey, it was like, well, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of some places the skin of the earth is very thin. The space between this world and the other world is very, very, very thin. Yes. And Whitby is, if that thing is true, Whitby is one of those places. I'm very much a science-based person, but that place is otherworldly. That place, it turned me inside out like a sock. I don't know why. It was some combination of the air and the sea and the stones, the grass. But that sense of history, it overwhelmed me. Suddenly history to me was really real. And that sounds silly, maybe.
No.
But by that, I mean, it became very clear to me that history wasn't just a story. History was made of real people doing real things. These people who had put these stones together for a reason, they weren't doing it because they thought, well, damn it, I'm a historical character. I'm heading towards this thing we all know is going to happen. And so I'm doing it now and I'm going to be fit. No, they have no idea. They're just living their lives the best they can day by day. Everything is potential to them still. And so that place was just so astonishing to me that I wanted to know who made it. And so, you know, I got the little tourist pamphlet from the visitors centre. Actually, there wasn't a visitors centre then. Back in the day, it was just a ruin. But they had a little table with leaflets, and I got one of those. And I discovered that the place was founded 1,400 years ago by a woman called Hild of Whitby. And I thought, hang on, 1400 years ago was the so-called Dark Ages, and how could a woman in the Dark Ages, where women were just kind of chattel, or that's what I'd been taught at school anyway, how could a woman do something like this? How on earth did she get to do that? And how on earth did she do it so well and become so amazing that she's known 1400 years later? What's that about? So I thought, well, okay, I went to the library to look for a book about Hild. There were no books about Hild. I mean, there weren't even, I'm not talking about a scholarly monograph. There weren't even any racy bodice rippers. And there's almost always something like that about all women in history. I mean, that's what usually comes first. I'm casting no aspersions on bodice rippers. Some of them are pretty good, just saying. But there was nothing. All there was like a couple of paragraphs in a book by an 8th century monk, the Venerable Bede. And so I was desperate to find out about this woman. I thought, how did she do this? What is wrong? Because history says this is what's possible, but reality, these stones, the name of this woman, says history must be wrong. We must have got it wrong somehow. So I basically started reading up about the period, and I've been doing that now for more than 20 years. I love learning this stuff. And eventually, there was no way to find out about Hild herself because there is no information. So I thought, well, I'm just going to have to run this giant controlled experiment. So I built the 7th century, and then I put the little teeny tiny Hild in the 7th century and watched her grow. But for that experiment to have any chance of being anything remotely like the truth, I had to not ever contravene what is known to be known, hence all the research. I mean, I researched everything you can possibly imagine, and I love it. And I still have I have a stack of about 30 books right now that I need to be reading for the next book, because there will be more. And I love figuring stuff out. So in Menewood, there's the first huge battle makes complete sense. Bede, the way he describes it, everything makes sense to me. It's you don't need any supernatural explanations. But the big climactic battle at the end of the book, that makes no sense. It's actually kind of impossible as written about. And of course it's explained away by people like Bede and Adam Nan, another chronicler, as basically God did it. And I'm not, that doesn't satisfy me, you know. And so I came up with another solution.
And I have to say, the solution you came up with, I was going back through the notes I made in my phone. I read this big ass book all on my phone, sometimes 100 pages at a time. Talk about immersive. And one of the notes, I went back because somebody taught me as I was reading it. They said, "Oh, you can search your text." I was like, "Really?" So yeah, just pull them down and you get the search window. So I put Menewood in every one of those, texted them to myself, and I went back and I see one that says Hild's pay-op, and I'm like, "What on earth is this?" And then I realized it was Hild's psy-op. Her psychological operation. And I won't say any more than that, but it's a completely credible thing that she does in that terminal battle that just took the top of my head off. So bravo, nicely done.
Thank you.
That's an understatement. However, you also took away my next question in answering that. So I'll ask one from the chat, and this is from Kate J. asks, she writes, I'm rereading Hild in preparation for Menewood, and as a weaver and dyer myself, I have been delighted by your accurate portrayals of tablet weaving and natural dyeing. Do you weave, dye, and if not, how did you come by your textile expertise?
I don't weave, I don't dye, I don't sew. I don't do any of that stuff. How I came about my expertise? Well, I don't actually have any. I read a lot. First of all, what really got me so interested in the textiles is that I read a book by Penelope Walton Rogers, where she talks about the research she had done and discovered that women in early medieval England would have spent roughly 65% of their time on textile production, which is insane because that's as much time as sleeping, food preparation, and childcare put together. So that's where I came up with the concept of yamachi, because you would need two women working together are much more efficient. One can look after the kids and grab them. And things like tablet weaving, it really helps to have two people.
Mm-hmm.
But how did I learn to do it? I did a lot of reading. And then I thought about it. I thought about really how would it feel? How easy? How do you keep the tension on something? What would you have to do? What could go wrong? Usually what could go wrong is a really good way into figuring things out. I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry I'm not an actual expert. I did play one on TV.
I love I love that you willingly blow away the smoke and show the mirror in that answer. But here, this is not like, and I have many issues with John Updike, but Updike said something that I treasure to this day. I heard him interviewed on NPR once about his novel Brazil, which is his attempt at magic realism. And the NPR interviewer said, "So I gather you did a lot of research about Brazil to write this novel." And he said, "No, I made it up." You don't have that luxury here. You are writing a historical novel, but I know it started as a fantasy novel. So talk about that and what happened there. Why did this not end up as a series of fantasy novels?
Mainly because I wanted to create this experiment. I wanted a real experiment, and I really, it went from just writing a fantastic story to actually a mission. I'm just so bent out of shape at how women and queer people and people of color and disabled people and on other traditionally not well represented groups are treated in history. It's wrong. I mean, every single medieval fiction you ever read, it's all white people. There are no disabled people. Everyone's either rich or poor and toothless. There are no queer people unless they're evil. And it just pissed me off. I thought, no, if there are queer people, people of color, disabled people, underprivileged people here and now, there would have been then. And people then were just people, the way we're just people. We're not human beings, sort of, in terms of brain architecture, haven't changed for tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of years. The way we approach the world, or the way we process signals, is just the same. We would come to the same conclusions. If you got taken back in time and dropped in there and grew up there, you would think the same way about that world as a person taken from that time as a child and brought up here. There is no difference. And so my mission became to basically recast past, to so that people like us belonged there. Because if we belonged there, then we definitely belong here, and which gives us a fighting chance of belonging in the future. So essentially, yeah, I wrote the books to change the world, one reader at a time.
Nothing major.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Details.
sure. Why not? I think Hild gets a theme song in this book. Have I got
She
that
gets
right?
several, actually. She gets several.
Is the song of Branwen old or new? I couldn't tell. I
I
found
don't
one.
know. I'm sure there is a song of Branwen, but
Yeah,
I don't know what it
I
would
found
be.
one on YouTube, but who knows what the origins of it are.
Oh yeah, no, all those songs they're from all mostly the Irish and Welsh stuff.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
no.
Another question from the chat, Nicola, from Eloise Lindblom. How did you come upon the changes in spellings / namings from Hild to Menewood? And please address that, and then I have a little anecdote to share about names.
I think what you're asking is, why did I change the spellings of a couple of places? So, for example, in Hild, a place called Catterick is called Catterick, but in Menewood it's called Kittrate, which is a much more accurate word for the time. And I changed it because I just couldn't bear to keep calling it Catterick once I knew it would have been called Kittrate. But it took me a while to find the right word for that place. I wish I had been able to do it for Hild. At some point, maybe we can reprint the book and just do a wash through it and regularize everything. And as for why some places have modern names, I think it's important to have one or two anchors for the readers. So York will always be York as opposed to Everwich, because I think it helps people to have at least one thing to hang on to in this sea of different languages washing over them. And I had so many arguments with editors and agents about my use of other languages. They're like, no, you need to explain. I'm like, I really don't. They'll catch up. But that's part of the immersion too. Because if the reader is working hard enough and they are committing to the book, and then you've got them. Yeah. I'm sorry. I hope I answered your question. I hope I understood your question correctly.
Well, here's hoping. I know the River Esk shows up in this book at some point, and there's a very personal story about that.
Yeah, it's true. So the River Esk runs right through Whitby, actually bisects Whitby. There are cliffs on each side, and the Esk runs between the cliffs to the sea where the harbour is. And my wife, Kelly, her last name is Eskridge. And so we went to Whitby together in 1991. And I mean, I always knew the river was called the Esk. I just never put two and two together. And Kelly's like, oh my God, I know that my family originally is from England, but the Esk, maybe I'm from here. I said, well, maybe you are. Except there are several River Esks in the UK, but it just, but let's pretend it was that one, because I would like it to have been. Yeah.
Well, my friend Lee Fury, who was a great fan of Hild, and I think just started reading Menewood, we were talking about names in the book, and she pointed out to me that her suspicion is that Uladus, and I'm going to try to spell Uladus from memory. Gwladus. Have I got that
Excellent.
right?
Well done. Yeah.
Uladus. She says, I think that became Gladys. It's like, I bet that's right. So, but who knows? Names are funny. One of the things I learned, I know I texted you at some point when I was looking up something else and found a reference to Hild. I want to say Hild as a surname, and it is actually a reference to hell, right? And like Hellcat. Do you remember this? Do you remember this text that I sent you? And you wrote back like Hild, Hellcat from hell. And, yeah.
Hild, the word actually means battle.
Well, and the villain here, I looked up. I think I looked up Cadwallon.
Mm-hmm.
I looked him up on Wikipedia, and I think that name just means war leader. But a lot of names mean war leader, it turns out. Hetheric, which comes into English, the modern English, as hat-trick, just like hat trick, like in hockey. I was like, wow. Also war leader. So which I guess that's appropriate. You go to a fight and the hockey match breaks out. So let's see. Nothing, no new, just nothing new there. What are you working on now, Nicola?
Right this minute, nothing. Because I was working on Menewood right up until the last minute, and I mean that literally. Mm-hmm. This was a very interesting publishing process. I actually rewrote the book once it had gone through first pass proofs, which is just not
after this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So that thing, if you have a paper arc or you got an early e-arc from NetGalley, you are not reading the book.
Yeah.
You are reading a slightly messier, flabbier version. I mean, I still think it's a good book, don't get me wrong.
It's
but
great.
The book in hardcover, that's the book. Also, any Kindle or audiobook is the book.
I think you have a wee history of this. Didn't Slow River have like some major change after it was already an advanced reading copy?
No.
Not
that I recall. Maybe have I forgotten something?
I think you've forgotten something. The main character's name changed.
Oh my God! Holy shit! You are absolutely right. Yes, because I was doing an interview with a Dutch magazine, and I was and they had read the galley.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, because I had called her Law van Osterling, and they're like, that makes no sense. I mean, that would not be a Dutch name. And I'm like, it wouldn't? He said, no, you'd want to call her Law van de West. I'm like, okay. So, Brand, thank you. I had completely forgotten about that, Eddie.
Oh, wow. And that's what I'm here for. I do maintain one other person. So ER said, as she was introducing me, that I've been editing these C.T. Vivian sermons. The Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, who was a lieutenant of Martin Luther King Jr., his daughter engaged me to edit some transcriptions of his sermons. She is now the only person I am certain has, apart from you, me, and Kelly, who has also touched your hand-bound version of Penny in My Mouth. Because she brought me a galley of the sermon book yesterday, and I said, I wanted you to see this thing since we talked about it so much.
I made that book.
You made that book. You made that book with
my bare
duct tape. And what are the boards? I said they look like fancy manila folders you might find.
No, they're kind of like with this vinyl stuff that I got from the store.
Okay.
And
yeah, I thought it was,
yeah.
Yeah, I was like, it
And then
seemed
it's
like,
hand sewn, so it's sewn
oh
together.
yeah. So
So I think I made 3.
yeah, so
I have one. You have
hmm
one. I have no idea where the other one is.
yeah. So and that's for people who are wondering, what's penny in my mouth? That's the blue place.
Yes, and I liked that title. It's just that I sent it to my agent. She read it and Penny in my mouth. She said, "Who's Penny?" I'm like,
Well, so that reminds me, there is a reference in Menewood. Hild is trying to fall asleep next to maybe Uladus, maybe somebody. No, maybe somebody. I think somebody else, and I don't want no spoilers. And Hild can't fall asleep, and the person on the other side of the bed says, "Take a walk up the hill." Am I correctly interpreting that as a euphemism for masturbation?
no.
Oh,
She actually meant just go
go
for
take
a
a
walk.
walk.
Yeah.
Don't.
Sorry.
Well, Mons Veneris, it's a mound or a barrow or a hill or I thought it was an elaborate Latinate dirty joke. So, but I'm constantly looking for those. Go figure. Catholic school. I think we're
Well,
both
me too. Yeah, in Catholic
both
school.
Catholic school survivors. So,
Mm.
And although I am, I'm not gonna go into my adversarial relationship with Rome, but it's a great education, but it leaves a mark, or
It does.
15. So, but I can think of I know so many creative people who I know had Catholic educations. My latest discovery is Eric Voss, who's he's an online movie critic. This guy does the deepest analyses of movies I've ever seen. If you have not watched his reading, and it is a reading of Kubrick's The Shining, you should seek it out. It's really something else. ErikVoss, really astonishing.
Speaking of reading, should I do another?
Yes, I think you should do another reading.
Okay. This one is a very short reading. It's from the other end of Hild's emotional spectrum. And it comes from quite near the end of the book, where she is in her hidden redoubt, her special valley of Menewood, and just thinking about what everything means to her and what she's been through. Menewood had spoken to her from the moment she found it. Here, now, she could feel the life in its dirt, like a hum under her feet, her sit bones, her hands. She watched an ant climb the leaves of the last turnips waiting to be pulled. Each leg was segmented, tiny hairs glinted on its abdomen, and its eyes seemed latticed and grey as a sieve. Its hard casing gleamed the dark brown of burnt honey. A tiny thing, but perfect in every way. Even the turnip stem with one leaf missing was exactly as it should be, perfect in its imperfection, beautiful, alive. The whole garth felt like a pool of life, endlessly renewed by the hidden font, the spring welling at the centre of all things. Between her fingers, she saw a speck of worm cast, the glitter of mica, and there, by a log, a woodlouse, so many legs it looked as though it swam as much as it walked, moving into the cool, dark realm under the bark. She dug her fingers in the dirt and felt each crumble and granule. Each was just the right shape to make the perfect space between it and the next, space enough for the worm to glide through and between. Each was just the right weight for the mold to move aside as it followed the worm, just the right consistency to collect and hold water for the roots of growing things to absorb. It was as though this whole marvelous interlocking puzzle were cut to fit together exactly like the figures Cian had once carved. And it no longer mattered that they were not with her. It mattered only to be here, to feel the life, the purpose in the life under her feet, under her own skin. She saw how each leaf hanging from the tree was designed to catch the right portion of light and gain the most shelter from the wind. She saw the same pattern in her skin and the weathering wood, and knew it was repeated in the wax honeycomb laid down by bees. It was the pattern of life and built to a purpose, and that purpose was itself life. She had only to decide to live it. Sunlight lay upon her like a blessing.
As do your words, Nicola. Apart from a handful of your short stories, I have read pretty much everything you've ever published. And I look forward to continuing to do that for as long as you choose to put words out in public.
Well, I have a long way to go with Hild. I mean, she has another 40 years of her life, at least, to go.
Mm.
And a lot happens in that time. So I'm already thinking about the next volume. And then, of course, I really want to write more of Peritier as well from Spear. I want to.
Mm-hmm. I was hoping you would.
I want to carry that story on, and I have all sorts of nifty ideas about that.
Someone asks a question about Spear. I wonder if it is predicated maybe on a misunderstanding of when Spear came out. Did writing Spear give you permission, in quotes, to ground Hild in history? Was there any tension to make the Hild story a bit less strictly historical? I think it's
no. What Spear did for me with regard to Menewood was I had been struggling with Menewood for a long time. I would write the book, and it was good. I knew that what I was writing was good, but I kept trying to fit it into this mold that I had originally considered, which is these 14 years of her life. And it just wouldn't go. It wouldn't go, and I just kept getting stuck. And then I wrote Spear, and that book, that experience, it just set me on fire. It was amazing. It was such exhilaration writing that book. And I came out of that and went straight back into Menewood. This time I thought, well, fuck it. I know the story I'm writing. I should just write that story. And so I wrote half of this ginormous 270,000 word book in 6 months. I came out of Spear, went straight into that, and bang. And the first half had taken me years. The second half. So that's what Spear did for me. But no, because with Spear I got to have actual magic, which was enormous fun. So I got that out of my system. So Menewood, I was very happy to stick strictly to the possible.
Okay. If you're game, there is one further question. This one also relates to
I'm
Spear.
happy.
And I'm sorry, the previous question was from David C. This one is from Camille Kammer. This is a kind of crossover question. I've noticed some similarities between Hild and the protagonist from Spear, reverence for the natural world being one. Do you envision these two characters in conversation with each other? Thank you so much.
actually in conversation with each other, no. I am very, very wary. I don't know if you're familiar with basically what I think of as the grand older men of science fiction, Heinlein, Asimov, people like that. As they got older, those writers just tried to pull together bits from all their different worlds and stories and smoosh them together in places that they just didn't belong. So, and given that Perretier is actually a supernatural figure, partially, bringing her into Hild's world would really invalidate this experiment I'm running. So that wouldn't work. But in terms of those two figures approaching the world similarly, absolutely, they're kind of like cousins that way, except that Hild's apparent magic is just that. It's apparent, and it's based on her intelligence and observation. And Perretier, of course, is also observant and smart, but she is actually magic too.
I like to think that they are both afloat on the sea of story, but Perretier is hidden by mists that even Hild cannot see through.
Yeah, true.
So, ER, how are we on time, please?
We're actually right about at our end.
Well, Nicola, is there anything else that you would like to say before we close up shop?
I would just like to make one point, which is that Menewood is actually full of disability rep, and nobody ever notices. I don't know why.
I noticed.
But there's a lot of disability rep in there. It's not about disability, just like it's not about being queer or about being a woman. But there's a lot in there. And so, if anyone listening to this has read the book and has noticed, I'd love to hear your opinions. And you can email me. My email is nicola@nicolagriffith.com. It's really easy to remember, and I'm happy. I love getting comments from readers. So, yeah, I would particularly like to hear about that.
Well, I see that ER, I believe, has shared that. I'm not sure how long that sticks around.
But also, it's very easy to remember.
And it's very easy to remember. So, and we've said it here, NICOLA, if you're hearing it now and have never seen the name spelled before, like Nicholas, no S. Nicola, thank you so much. I always look forward to the opportunity to talk with you about what you have written, because it's always so goddamn good.
Thank you. And it's lovely to talk to you too. And thank you for remembering about law.
It's my job. So, Nicola, I love you, and I look forward to seeing your smiling face and reading your sparkling words again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much for this beautiful conversation and for your beautiful words, Nicola. It's always a pleasure to have you here. So I want to make sure that folks know that they can click this teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy Menewood directly from Charis. It really does help us when you buy your event books from us. You can also buy Hild and Spear and many other things from us. You can also... I was about to say, you can also buy Ed's book, Dread Isle, from us. So we would love for you to go down the rabbit hole. If this is somehow you've wandered into this space and are just discovering that there's a whole world, get into it. We would love for you. We were just talking about how this is a quintessentially sort of cozy fall into winter book. And so cozy up by the fire, jump into this world. I love a hearty book. So It gives you many hours of pleasure. So thank you all for being with us. Thank you for your great questions. And if there's somebody that you wish had been with you tonight watching this, you can let them know it's going to be up on our Charis YouTube channel in a couple days. That is just youtube.com/Charis Circle. So check that out and share it with your friends. So thank you all so much. Take good care, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, ER. Thank you, Charis.
Thank you, Charis. Yes, thank you, ER.